Hey, folks, it's Nate. It's time I got back to the drawing board, except I'm not at the drawing board. I'm going full in on a little Twitter examination here. Here we have your boy Donald, and he's made some commentary on this panel from a recent Daredevil comic. Now, disclaimer: I don't follow Daredevil. I don't care, and I know it's probably not a popular position among Comicsgate, but he's just not a super interesting hero to me. I'm sure that if I had followed him for a long time, he might be, but there it is. I've talked more about my history with comics in other videos. What I want to talk about today is the points that there was a short examination here of this by Donald. He says at Don Cates regarding Daredevil versus Banner in Marvel Knights #6. Daredevil would know better than to put himself in an unsafe position like that could result in him dying. If you or the artist insist on using real fighting techniques, please research proper execution. So this is an armbar, and this is not how you typically would execute it. I don't actually have a picture here of typical armbar execution, but generally you would do it with the arm extended out sideways from the body. So instead of um, his head being here, his head would typically be here. I'm not very well versed in grappling. I don't know how easy or hard this would be to break out of. But given that Banner's other arm is right here by the leg, I imagine it would not be that hard to get out of it. So um, that's the first issue here. There are other issues to think about. One of the biggest is if you studied historical fighting techniques, they tend not to do really serious grabs or holds as a finisher. They actually tend to be used as a way to immobilize for your finisher. Like you would grapple someone and then hold their arm out of the way while you stab them with a dagger or something like that. Um, you didn't use grapples at all because it immobilized you. And of course, in a real world fight, something outside of a ring, you're going to have always present the possibility that someone else will enter the fight other than the person you're currently fighting with. So, like, if there was someone off panel over here, say, and they came up to just soccer kick Daredevil in the head here. Well, he's got to get untangled from Banner, and he's got to get back to his feet before he can react to that. So you don't see a whole lot of grappling, especially ground grappling, as a way to force submission from someone. Usually, it's a way to open someone up so you can put a weapon in position. Of course, Daredevil doesn't carry a bladed weapon. He does have a club, so he might grapple someone and then whack them with a club or something like that. But yeah, in a fight outside a ring, you're probably not going to finish someone by grappling. Just not a safe bet. I'm not sure that's what Donald was referring to. I think it more likely that he's referring simply to the fact that Banner can bring all of his other three limbs to bear against Daredevil here. And an armbar is supposed to isolate that limb and put you out of reach of the others. So it's just not proper execution. Anyways, later Donnie Cage just says, "Cool to see you're still reading my books," which is a pretty good response to that. Neutral response to that kind of criticism. I really don't have anything to say about that. Blake says, "I love the triangle armbar. Looks awesome. Comics and movies aren't real life. Techniques will never match the UFC exactly, and that's okay." And then Donald quote tweets that and says, "Comics aren't real life, which is why if someone is going to insist on putting realistic techniques into a scene, more research than watching a UFC fight should be done. Otherwise, just make things up. It's the biggest reason I prefer imagination over realism." And this is a really good point. Comic books are a visual medium, and it's important to say realistic fighting techniques frequently look boring. Actual good fighting techniques are tight, well honed, brutally executed moves that put your opponent out of the fight as quickly as possible. And there's rarely big windups or flashy hits to them. It's just a lot of going for positioning and setting up, that brutal move. And again, I was talking about earlier, UFC fights. Um, that's a fight in a ring. There are a lot of things taken for granted in a UFC fight. You and your opponent are in the same weight class. You both have no weapons. There are rules about the gear you can bring. Um, there's a predetermined time. There's guarantee that there's never going to be more than one person there for you to fight. At least so far as I know, UFC hasn't gone full WWE yet. Um, but yeah, so if you are going to use realistic fight techniques, you do need to do more research. Um, but I want to make a quick case here for what is at least maybe using this technique, um, because comics are a visual language, and the triangle armbar is a very well known move. It's a move that suggests um, power, technique, and finality. Maybe using it is what they were going for here. They don't really care about whether it would really work this way, just that they're showing that Daredevil is winning this fight. They're showing that his technique is superior to Banner's strength, and he's going to win out by using this armbar. So to a certain extent, it makes sense. You use something that the audience can recognize to signal to them that technique is carrying the day. Maybe that's what they were going for, maybe not. However, I still think that on the whole, if what you want is pure visual storytelling, Donald is correct. Make something up that looks like it's technique over power, and don't worry about whether it's actually technique over power. Because if you do it and you screw it up, people are going to notice. Like this is pretty clearly not a good hold. Like I said, I barely I barely know anything about grappling. I've never wrestled. Well, not in a serious studied sense. I wrestled when I was like 8, and I had friends I roughhoused with. Um, but yeah, I've never wrestled in a serious sense. And even just looking at that, I can see anyone can get out of that hold, and it doesn't probably require a whole lot of technique or strength. Um, so yeah, if you do go to use a real technique, um, make sure you use a technique that you know how to apply, um, and study. It's not a joke, because that's actually immersion breaking when you use technique that's supposed to be, a big deal like that, and it doesn't pan out. So I just wanted to, talk a little bit about that. Do your homework, and there are in the age of the internet, there are a lot of places where you can go a step beyond in trying to um, learn fighting techniques and stuff like that. A great resource that I like to consult a lot is Wiktenauer, a HEMA Alliance project, as it says here. This is a website that compiles pretty much every historical manual on um, hand-to-hand combat from Europe that they can get their hands on. The caveat that it's from Europe is important. There are other sites for um, texts not from Europe, but Wiktenauer is particularly concerned with historical European martial arts, and they have a lot of great resources. Like here, these are just pages from historical fencing manuals. This is what people studied. I mean, they obviously. I've heard these described more as advertisements. Uh, Masters would release these to kind of entice people to come to their school and learn the techniques depicted in them. But these are the best leads we have on what historical fighting techniques look like. And as you can see, as I was saying before, this stuff it's not really flashy. Um, there's a lot of jacking for position, a lot of keeping your guard up so you don't, get stabbed, bleed out, and die. But there's a lot of information here if you want to really dig into practical applied fighting that was not intended um, for the ring or just for the ring. But if you look at again, if you look at the kind of fighting they're doing, some of it could be pretty cool. Like here's that a shoulder hip throw. You see that in judo a lot too. That could be a cool moment. Um, this kind of grapple move that you see done with a dagger, that could be a cool moment. And these were all techniques taught by actual experienced fighters. They had been used in combat, and the guy who taught them and used them had survived that combat. So it has a pretty good pedigree. But these were not combat sport things. They were not intended for sporting environments. They were designed for people who were taken by surprise, people who had to keep their eyes out around them for people coming up on them. These are the kind of techniques that you should really look at if you want to use realistic techniques. But overall, if given the choice, maybe you use a little bit of this, but on the whole, making it up for visual impact is going to lead to better storytelling. Um, Trying to be super realistic, unless that's the tone you're going for in your story, is a lot of work in order to make it actually be realistic. That maybe very few people in your audience will appreciate, and B, will not always let you give the kind of emotional high or emotional reaction that you're going for in your fight scene. Because again, this stuff, it's if you're kind of a fighting geek, it's very interesting, and it is rather practical. But man, it would be hard to make for an exciting fight. And if you're going to have action scenes in your comic books, okay, I have not seen this page. This is actually quite funny. Pulls his hand up between his legs and grabs his ankle. That could be a fun technique. But my point is, um, you need your action beats to be cool and impactful, and not necessarily appeal to the fighting geeks, the people who really know the ins and outs of it, so much as it is just saying, here is a a cool moment in a fight, um, and then moving on to the next action beat. So yeah, I guess the point I'm getting across here is don't let being a don't let a personal interest or a personal need to depict um, real life get in the way of telling your story. Your story by default is not real life. So put the needs of your story over your need for realism, over your need for authenticity, and you will have a stronger story, one with fewer holes in it. And just remember, the rule of cool is a thing. The cooler something is, the more likely your audience is to let you get away with it. Anyway, that's all I got for tonight. There's a like button and subscribe button down below. Use them as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.